Las Vegas, Nevada is known as the ultimate playground for adults, full of casinos, nightlife, and world-renowned stage acts. But it's also a city that became synonymous with corruption, intrigue, and vice. In 1971, the death of one of its most famous residents sparked a controversial investigation that would leave everyone wondering what really happened. The Las Vegas Strip is one of the most iconic and recognizable locations in America, lined with storied hotels and casinos. In recent years, Vegas has attempted to shed its image of debauchery for something more family-friendly. But during the 1960s, it was a hotspot for entertainers, athletes, and the mafia, earning it the nickname Sin City.
Vegas is really beginning to find its footing as a little bit of a boom town in the 60s and move into the 1970s.
Las Vegas was the hub of everything. It was the biggest night spot, entertainment spot in the world. And you wanted to gamble, and you wanted to see great shows and great entertainment. You went to Las Vegas.
After gambling became legal in 1931, mobster Bugsy Siegel saw an opportunity to invest. He opened the Flamingo Casino and Hotel in 1946, and the mob soon took over.
It was definitely a mob town. It was their playground. And that's why they got all these great entertainers, because they control almost all the nightclubs in the country. They could afford to pay these nightclub entertainers what you would pay a movie star, because they had not only the ticket sales, but the subsidy from casino gambling.
This was the perfect setting to see them running portions of the boxing industry.
Boxing was very lucrative, first of all. That's one of the reasons why the mob gets involved. But secondly, I think that just maybe boxers are attracted by mob guys, and mob guys are attracted by fighters.
Up until the 60s, Madison Square Garden was the main stage for professional boxing. But it would find a new home 2,500 miles away in the desert of Nevada.
Some of the casinos put up money to host this heavyweight championship fight in Las Vegas in 1963, the first title fight ever held in Las Vegas.
For a city built on gambling, boxing was a perfect match. The casinos soon took control, inventing the phenomenon of big-budget title fights. And in December of 1969, there was a lot of money riding on the highly anticipated comeback match for ex-heavyweight champion Sonny Liston.
Sonny Liston was considered the Mike Tyson of the 1960s.
Sonny Liston is my idol as a fighter. He had to beat all the best contenders to get the people to take him seriously, to accept him.
Only 2 minutes and 22 seconds have elapsed.
He did it on effort alone. December of 69, takes a fight with Leotis Martin here in Las Vegas. About that, everybody thinks he's going to win.
But no one could have predicted that it would be the beginning of the end of Liston's complicated and tumultuous life story. On January 5th, 1971, Sonny's wife Geraldine and son Daniel returned home to Las Vegas from Christmas vacation with her family.
She actually planned to stay longer, but she became concerned after Sonny stopped answering her phone calls. As soon as Geraldine stepped inside the home, she smelled a rotting smell and thought maybe she had left something in the kitchen. But when she stepped into the bedroom, she discovered Sonny's decomposing body.
It was obvious he was dead. She called the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department called homicide. When I got to the scene, Geraldine Liston had already left the scene, because I guess she was quite traumatized.
38-year-old Sonny had always been a mountain of a man, with enough power to shatter his opponents. So, what could have happened?
We knew he was past his prime. but he was a relatively, young guy. And it was a shock. It was unbelievable that this could have happened.
He was laying in bed. It was a real pretty bad odor. It was really disturbing because he was one of my heroes as a kid. I'll never forget that.
Charles Sonny Liston was born to a family of sharecroppers on a cotton plantation in Arkansas during the Great Depression. Since the state did not require birth certificates, the exact date of his birth became the first of many mysteries that defined his life.
There is some question about his actual birth date, whether it was 1932 or a couple years before. But either way, we know that Sonny Liston was born essentially during the Great Depression. Liston is born in tragedy. I mean, from the beginning, born to a large tenant farming family in rural Arkansas. I mean, the likelihood that which you're able to meet your full potential, the odds are just so far against it.
In 1946, a hard winter left the family struggling to get by. But when his mother left to find work in St. Louis, Sonny ran away from home to follow her.
The father beat him every day. Sonny was the biggest child. He would get the most beatings. There were scars on his face. There were scars on his arm. And of course, he left the father because this was like a childhood from Dickens or Dostoevsky, where there were beatings and hard work.
Once reunited with his mother in St. Louis, Sonny adapted to life on the streets to make ends meet.
He still has no formal education, right? So how do you even translate that success into something that is lasting if you would deny what you need to be successful in other ways because you were born black and poor?
Unfortunately, he assimilated himself into a world of petty criminals.
Over the next 6 years, Sonny was involved in various muggings and robberies.
You live by the sword and you die by the sword. And in them days, there was a lot of tough guys out there, and you get yourself in trouble real easy.
24 arrests in St. Louis, and then he catches the big case. Arrested for essentially strong-arm robbery. And he gets sent to state penitentiary.
While behind bars, 20-year-old Sonny finally discovered his true calling.
There was this notion that the way to rehabilitate the young men was through boxing, through this sort of physical competition, exert yourself, right? And that this is the way to teach discipline. And Liston thrives. Liston's involvement with boxing while he's in prison creates for him, for the first time in his life, real opportunities for upward mobility.
He had these great attributes that were there for boxing. He was about 6'1", which is big for the time, but his hands, his fists, which you make your living with in boxing, were disproportionately large. He had an extremely long reach to go along with his physical size. And he had a killer instinct, second to none, and a natural punch.
It wasn't long until the mob came calling. After 2 years in prison, the mob heard about Liston and pulled some strings to get him paroled early.
When he comes out, he assimilates into the mob and the gangster world.
Under control of the mob, he quickly rose through the amateur ranks, winning his first Golden Gloves title in 1952.
He was a brute, a great jab, maybe the greatest of all time. Liston was the ultimate intimidator. He would take his robe off and was heavily muscled, and he could punch. He could punch hard.
He could knock you out with a jab. Foreign guys, they would have had to pay them extra to get in the ring with him because he would just hammer them. You went in with Liston, you put your life in your hands.
They thought that, and I thought also, that I could beat Sonny Liston. I wound up with 71 stitches, a broken nose, and broken left cheekbone.
Sonny was unstoppable in the ring. But when he wasn't boxing, he couldn't stay out of trouble. Less than 4 years after being paroled from prison, he was arrested for fighting with an officer over a parking ticket.
Police officer comes up, begins to harass him, and it escalates.
Liston ended up breaking the leg of a policeman. It was, a felony. Sonny was going away.
Sonny spent the next 9 months in jail. After his release in 1957, he decided to change his life and married his girlfriend, Geraldine Chambers, in St. Louis.
Geraldine offered this positive force. She offers a degree of comfort constantly, this degree of love that is really sort of an anchor for him.
With Geraldine by his side, Sonny continued to succeed in the boxing world.
Just rolled through his division like a gargantuan steamroller. Every single contender in front of me just blew out of it.
By 1962, Sonny had earned the right to face heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson. The fight lasted only 2.5 minutes. But no matter how well Sonny performed in the ring, boxing fans hated him for his ties to crime.
And he was the champion that nobody wanted.
I remember my boss came up and said, "I still don't like him because he had come out of prison." He had everybody rooting against him.
He never could quite get anybody else to see what he had accomplished. That's the tragedy of his life.
So I think there's something in Liston that just says to hell with it. No matter what, he can't please the public. He remains a pariah no matter what happens with him.
In 1964, Sonny faced a new challenger, a hero of the Rome Olympics named Cassius Clay. The two would fight twice that year, and both bouts were controversial.
But I thought Liston was going to beat him. I thought Liston hit too hard.
In their first match, Sonny was accused of cheating, but Clay still managed to win. The rematch took place 9 months later. By then, Clay had changed his name and his image.
He goes into the rematch, claims now Muhammad Ali, with a group that is perceived as a racist group.
The Nation of Islam, there begins to be a little bit of a turn in terms of the appreciation of Liston. People who were like, wait a minute, maybe Liston ain't that bad after all.
But this time, the outcome would be even more shocking.
He knew the only way he could beat Ali would be to knock him out, and the only time he could do that was early. So he chased him, and he threw jabs to set up the right hand, and he missed him. He's off balance. Ali brings the hand down and chops.
Liston goes down with what people would call a phantom punch.
Most people thought he was throwing the fight.
The punch and the fight would live on in infamy and cement the public's negative opinion of Sonny.
Liston completely repulsed everybody. My God, this guy didn't just lose, he quit, or he laid down, or he took a dive. But I think the die was cast for his future in Las Vegas.
In 1969, Sonny would move to Vegas and attempt to make a comeback. But less than a year later, he is found dead, and no one can understand why.
I was in shock. Who killed this guy? Who knows?
Las Vegas in the 1960s was a wild and unruly place, full of conmen and career criminals. But the city also suffered from a deep racial divide.
African Americans were not allowed to go on the Las Vegas Strip unless you worked one of the jobs in the back of the house. They would enter those buildings through the back. Sammy Davis Jr. would enter through the kitchen. Pearl Bailey would enter through the kitchen to get to the stage.
And the police were not friendly at all with African Americans.
This town was segregated. I had never seen true racism till I came out here.
In this one city at that one time.
Sonny no longer held the title belt, but he was still their champion. So, When he's found dead at his home in Paradise Palms, nobody wants to accept it. Instead, they want answers. Investigators find Sonny's body slumped on the bed, with a broken footstool nearby.
He'd been dead 4 or 5 days. He was all bloated. He was laying back. His feet were like on the floor.
How he exactly died is unclear because his body was so decomposed they couldn't determine the cause of death. The police thought maybe he had fallen, which would explain the broken stool. But the coroner learned through the autopsy that he didn't have any head trauma.
His wife, Geraldine, believes he's been killed, but police find no indications of forced entry or foul play. However, they do find evidence downstairs that suggests a different cause of death.
I was talking to the detective, and they said they found a balloon of heroin on the kitchen counter.
So it appears that he had died from a drug overdose.
The theory seems to be confirmed when autopsy reveals a needle mark on Sonny's arm. However, those close to the former champion insist he wasn't an addict.
He hated needles, and so it would be a surprise that he would die from a needle injection. I think what raises the suspicions is that Liston was not known as a heroin user. That raises real red flags.
But as investigators dig further, they discover Sonny had been leading a double life.
He was known to have been dealing at that time.
Liston had known associations with pretty serious narcotics traffickers.
Sonny Liston was influenced by the mob early in his career. Very tough people, and it's tough to get away from people like that, and it was especially tough in them days.
It's unclear how long Sonny had been involved with drugs, but it seems to have spiraled out of control in 1969 as his boxing career slips away. After a hard loss in December of 1969, Sonny lands what would be his final fight against legendary Chuck Wepner.
We had 9,000 people in the Jersey City Army, which was the biggest crowd for any fight in history. He was punching from the opening bell. The referee came in at the end of the 9th round and wanted to stop the fight, and I asked him to let it go one more round. I said, just one more round. I wanted to finish, to kick Sonny Liston's butt and beat him up, and it just didn't happen.
The win earned Sonny only $13,000.
Liston tries to mount a little bit of a comeback. So he's earning a little bit there, but he has to make money in other ways. And it appears that he was doing work, collections, enforcement for people who had organized crime connections. And eventually, it appears that he was doing a little drug trafficking himself.
Liston knew the mob well enough. He was involved in a day-to-day, relationship with them.
Sonny Liston was known as the leg breaker for the mob out in Las Vegas. And it was a fact. He was a money collector.
He's no longer just simply dabbling. He's actually operating and moving in their circles.
But a recent run-in with the law suggests Sonny may have been working both sides of the street, which could have landed him on the mob's hit list.
They had a search warrant for this house. There was 3 people there, and it was Earl Cage, whoever the other guy was, and Sonny Liston. My lieutenant went to Sonny and said, look, we're all friends here, and he took Sonny out of the room. They hauled the other 2 to jail. Sonny got to go home. Well, automatically, they thinking he was an informant or something because Sonny was given a pass.
However, despite growing evidence that Sonny had quite a few deadly enemies, Las Vegas police suddenly closed the case.
The coroner's report showed that there were only trace amounts of morphine in his system, but it wasn't enough to kill him. So they ruled that it couldn't have been an overdose or homicide.
The coroner attributes Sonny's death to natural causes. But to Sonny's loved ones, his death is anything but natural.
How many heavyweight champions die in this manner? But then, also because of the connections, right, with the criminal underworld, which just beg for speculation in terms of foul play.
With Sonny Liston, so always what happened?
The mafia's involvement in boxing started in the 1940s. Attracted by its money-making potential, Frankie Carbo, a killer for the Lucchese crime family, began to take control of the sport by managing the careers of young fighters with potential.
For a good part of boxing history, boxers have had their careers managed by individuals from the world of organized crime. Oftentimes, these boxers had no other choice but to associate themselves with these underworld figures. If they wanted to pursue a career in their sport of choice, there was often no other avenue to try to become a successful boxer. Sonny Liston was one of the best examples of this, and some people think that relationship is what ultimately led to his death.
On January 9th, 1971, a funeral is held for Sonny Liston at the Palm Mortuary. It's attended by an overflow crowd, including casino owners, card dealers, showgirls, and mobsters.
From birth to death, there was never a road for redemption for Liston, just a road to perdition. It is truly an American tragedy.
Sonny's loved ones are convinced of only two things. He didn't die of natural causes, and he didn't inject himself with heroin.
Sonny was deathly afraid of needles, and they discovered a needle mark on his arm. And those that knew him well suspected that if there was a needle mark, somebody else was behind it.
It seems possible that Liston's drug connections got him killed, but others believe it happened on the orders of a much more powerful enemy.
There was a big casino operative named Ash Resnick who came out of New York originally. He was a mainstream gambling. Resnick's name has been thrown around as being involved in his death.
Ash Resnick is sort of the organized crime connection for Sonny Liston in Las Vegas. Resnick is the one that sort of sets him up in that nice house. Resnick is also the one doing what organized crime does, right? Fixing fights.
Days before Sonny's death, he and Resnick were seen having two public arguments, one at the Stardust nightclub and the other at the Thunderbird Casino.
Witnesses at the time described these incidents as violent. Nobody knew for sure exactly what they were fighting about, but they definitely had ideas.
They did have a falling out. I heard stories, but never anything I believed.
Is it possible that Sonny Liston ran afoul of Resnick and Resnick, said, nope, this is not gonna fly, we're gonna do something? Absolutely.
Over the years, Sonny and Ash had made a lot of money from boxing, but some questioned exactly how they made it.
You have the criminal element. Yes, you have somebody who's known for participating in fixing fights. Yes, you have somebody who's dabbling in that world to make money.
A recent fight against boxer Chuck Wepner may have sealed Sonny's fate.
Some say he was supposed to throw the fight with Chuck Wepner, but just couldn't do it. The theory was that Ash Resnick and a lot of other mobsters had lost a lot of money betting on that fight.
I wish somebody had told me that. Maybe I should have said to him, hey, Sonny, what are you doing? You were supposed to have thrown this fight. I never heard that story.
Resnick had also been the promoter for both of Sonny's controversial matches with Muhammad Ali. As Sonny's manager, Resnick claimed he lost a lot of money, but it was later discovered that he'd actually made millions.
There's some speculation that Sonny Liston in the second fight takes a dive at the behest of the Nation of Islam, for whom Muhammad Ali was now firmly entrenched. Ali could retain this title in exchange for a percentage of Muhammad Ali's earnings going forward. And that, sort of later on in life, Sonny had begun to talk a little bit too publicly about the fact that he had a percentage of Ali.
The outcome of the first Ali-Liston fight was controversial, but the second is considered one of the most suspicious in boxing history.
Clearly, you look at the tape, he gets hit, but the question is, does he get hit hard enough, to warrant being sprawled out on the ring mat like he was?
For me, the big question wasn't why he went down. What might intrigue me is, why isn't he getting up? And what makes it worse, Ali won't go to a neutral corner because he's standing over him and Ali knows what's going to happen. He says, "Get up, sucker." They'll say it's fake. Get up, get up, get up. And Sonny, I'm not getting up.
However, many in the boxing world say it's unlikely.
There's stories that the Muslims threatened him, that the mob threatened him, that he made big bets on himself, that everything happened. But why? Why would he do that when the only identity he had, the only segue into real society, to something, was to be the heavyweight champ of the world?
I mean, you got to do a lot of backbending and twisting. It's just too many layers. Too many people need to be involved for that, I think, to really carry any weight in terms of a plausible motivation for Liston to be killed.
But organized crime and shady boxing deals aren't the only possibilities. And as other facets of Sonny's life begin to emerge, so do additional conspiracies.
Sonny had an affair going. Women were like grains of sand. He was womanizing. Sonny had a mistress over there that could have set him up to be killed.
Las Vegas has always had its share of crime. Considering its connection to gambling and vice, it's hardly surprising. But the death of Sonny Liston hit everyone hard, and everyone seems to have a theory about what or who killed him.
Since there was really no homicide investigation, there was really no closure to the case. And this caused a lot of rumors and speculation.
Some of the speculation even involves his wife, Geraldine.
Being married to Sonny could not have been easy.
He was a womanizer. And this town in those days, if you were anybody, the women were like grains of sand.
This is a guy, the kind of women he would have been getting. I mean, he can get any woman he wants. This is a world that was inconceivable to this kid growing up in a backwater in Arkansas. I don't think there was a week went by that he was sexually faithful to Geraldine. She, of course, knew it. You cannot not know it.
Sonny's philandering was bad enough, but Geraldine had a constant reminder of his infidelity living in her house. It turns out their adopted son, Daniel, was actually the product of one of Sonny's flings.
Sonny had a thing with a cocktail waitress, good-looking, busty blonde. One day, him and Geraldine were sitting in a restaurant. She come walking up with this young kid and said, "Here, this is your kid," and handed it to Sonny and walked off.
To prevent a scandal, Geraldine agreed to raise the child, keeping the real story out of the papers. Through the years, she continued to stand by Sonny, but everyone has a breaking point.
My God, did she finally reach her end and say, "I can't take it," to the point where she's so fed up? Does she now arrange for him to get a heroin overdose?
It's not hard to imagine for Geraldine to have built up that kind of animosity towards her husband. And then you take into consideration the things that Geraldine did after she discovered the body.
While Geraldine was never considered a suspect, some find her actions the night she found his body to be suspicious.
When his wife comes home and finds his body, finds him dead and literally decaying, that she doesn't immediately pick up the phone and call the police, but instead, goes to a friend, neighbor's house, and they come back and they spend several hours actually sort of cleaning up the place.
That's just not the kind of thing that you expect a family member to do when they find their loved one dead. Not unless there's something that they didn't want the police to find.
However, others believe there is a more innocent explanation.
It would be very surprising if his wife, Geraldine, didn't know of his involvement in the criminal underworld. So there would have been things around the house that would have pointed to that. So I don't think it was just simply a matter of sort of cleaning up a crime scene to mask something that she may have been involved with. So that's a possibility, that all she was simply doing was trying to clean up a space to protect the name and legacy of her husband.
That woman loved this man. She accepted his child from another woman. She knew what he was doing. I would have ruled her out immediately.
Perhaps Geraldine simply didn't talk to the police because she had a reason not to trust them.
The police had been harassing Sonny for as long as Geraldine and Sonny were together. And I'm sure she knew that those drugs were not there before she got there.
They said they found a balloon of heroin on the kitchen counter. And in the same breath, they told me that Geraldine had to clean the house up for 3 hours. How did she miss the heroin? I felt that somebody from the sheriff's office brought that heroin in to get a search warrant so they could look for more drugs than the cash in the house. That's bothered me for, 50 years.
No one knows what police might have been looking for. But the official explanation for Sonny's death would stand unchallenged for the next 10 years. Until a witness steps forward with an astonishing new story.
If you're a contract killer, the first person you need to kill after you kill the target and you've been paid is the guy that hired you.
During the 1960s, Las Vegas police were notorious for using extreme methods in their attempts to keep the peace.
They get rid of undesirables mostly by beating them up and dropping them on the other side of state lines. That could be a vagrant, homeless, criminals. That was considered cleaning up the streets. It was a different time, and they truly had a different way of doing things. And it definitely didn't earn them any friends amongst the Black community. And some consider the handling of Sonny's death as very suspicious.
In the years following the death of ex-heavyweight champion Sonny Liston, the residents of Las Vegas continued to question the mysteries surrounding the case.
It could have been a drug user, it could have been an overdose. It also could have been somebody deliberately gave him a hot shot.
The discussions about what happened and the speculation could not be silenced because everyone knew that there were people who had motivation as well as means to do Sonny Liston harm.
Then on June 14th, 1982, a man named Erwin Peters walks into Las Vegas police headquarters with new evidence to share.
Erwin Peters I had used as an informant in the 70s at the Las Vegas Police Department. And I always thought he was very reliable.
He claims that the person that killed Sonny was an undercover detective that was actually at the crime scene.
To their surprise, the man Erwin names as decorated former narcotics detective, Larry Gandy.
He said I gave him a hot shot for $25,000 for Ash Resnick. That was his story. And he told him that we met at the Sahara Saloon.
I'm not trying to make a case that Ash did this, but I will say, if Ash lost his temper and wanted some physical revenge, he had people who could do it for him.
When they track Gandy down, he immediately agrees to answer the allegations.
Anybody ever say I'm ducking and dodging? I'm not. I confront my enemies and I confront the truth. That's all you need in life. They said, do you know that you were accused of killing Sonny Liston. I said, I've never met Sonny Liston. I've never talked to Sonny Liston. They asked me about Ash Resnick, and if I knew him. I said, no, I've never met him. I never talked to him. I never had any dealings with him.
According to him, Irwin had made up the whole story to set him up as a killer.
Irwin Peters is one of the best con men I ever met, and that's why he made such a great informant for me.
It seems Irwin had gotten used to the money he had made being Gandy's informant. That went away when the detective retired. But he might have come up with a new scheme to get paid.
Irwin Peters knew that I had a little money. He knew that I had access to money because I saved. I'm a saver. He was burning through all of his proceeds from his illegal gains. And on drugs, he was just, you can't keep up with a heroin burner. And so he came to me wanting more money, and I wouldn't give it to him. If Irwin Peters could have proved murder on me of Sonny Liston, it would have been worth thousands between the publicity and from Metro, and they do pay, believe me. Law enforcement operates on money, on paying informants. Not only could he sell the story, he thought, it'd get me a life sentence and get me off the streets, because I was very vindictive.
But Irwin's story is full of holes, and there is no evidence connecting Gandy to the crime.
Well, first thing, I could never be a contract killer. I wouldn't kill anybody for $25,000. The next thing is, any smart hitman, if he kills anybody, once he's paid, he kills the guy that hires, because everybody flips on the hitman. It always comes out. The truth always comes out.
As far as investigators are concerned, that ends their brief relook at the case. But it wouldn't put an end to the mystery. 5 years later, in 1987, Irwin Peters is found dead in his garage.
The detective called me and says, did you know that they think you killed Irwin Peters? And I said, let me ask you a question. Was every bone in his body broken? They went, no. I said, then I didn't kill him because I would have beat him to death.
His death was ultimately ruled to be an accident. The truth surrounding Sonny's death remains elusive, and it would take 3 more decades for further clues to emerge.
It was almost like the devil said, okay, Sonny, I got one more thing for you to do. Die this way and leave a mystery behind you.
In the decades since Sonny Liston's mysterious death, many theories have emerged, but none have provided any clear answers.
He's such a great enigma, and he was a great fighter. Everything is a mystery with this guy.
Toxicology reports show that there wasn't enough heroin in his body to kill him. So the coroner said that it was natural causes.
The coroner ruled Sonny died of heart failure and lung disease.
A lot of people question how an athlete could die that way.
His report had ended the possibility that Sonny's death could be investigated as a murder.
It's not like there's a long track record of mob bosses killing boxers for failing to deliver and taking a dive. I think what is on firmer ground is to say speaks to their willingness to willfully look away. The only way you get that is by somebody with some real influence and power saying stand down, and that's what they did.
But in 2011, a discussion on an online boxing forum sheds further light on Sonny's final days.
According to the timeline, Liston was busy that week. He traveled to LA to meet with Paramount Studios about a movie deal, and also he had met with a boxer about a fight in Japan. Telephone records show that he made 2 phone calls to Geraldine and several phone calls to a hotel that he dealt drugs out of. He checked out of the Biltmore Hotel around midnight in downtown Los Angeles and then drove back to Las Vegas.
That put Sonny back at his home around 6 a.m. Wednesday, December 30th. And according to reports, he was met there by an unarmed narcotics agent who came with a message that gives more weight to a potential motive.
I think he was a snitch for John Sleeper.
John Sleeper was a controversial member of the Las Vegas Police Department who'd just been fired shortly before Sonny's death. Was it John Sleeper who paid Sonny the visit that night? And if so, why?
The speculation was that John Sleeper was there to give Sonny a warning. He had lost his job at the police department and he wouldn't be able to cover for Sonny anymore. So Sonny was now on his own.
He was always dependent upon the protection of other people. And so what happens when you lose that protection? In that sort of toxic environment, you don't have any protection when that blowback comes on you.
Did the seedy underbelly of Las Vegas catch up to Sonny despite Sleeper's warning?
It was in the opinion if somebody had killed him for being an informant for John Sleeper, that they would have injected him with a hot shot after having drinks, passed out. It only takes one load and you're gone. He was too big and too tough to say, here, I'm going to give you a shot. Are you kidding me? Heavyweight champion of the world, he'd beat you to a pulp. If he didn't want something, you're not going to give it to him. Whoever killed him, it had to be a total setup.
But without any evidence, it's just another murder theory.
The whole thing was a bad situation. It's never been proved. And if he was killed, the killers have probably gone to their grave.
50 years after Sonny Liston's death, we are still searching for the truth. But the more time that passes, the less likely it is we will ever find out.
There's always a question mark, but listen, he's just one of those interesting people that'll always be provocative for the public. He was anticipated to be the best heavyweight of all. That doesn't pan out. The great tragedy is he may have been able to turn them around, but he just didn't have the inner strength to do it. And he just fell back to really what he was, which is a guy with criminal intent from the time he was born and just never rose out of that. The money and the fame couldn't do it. Just wasn't strong enough to rise above it.
Oakland, California, with its sunny skies and mild weather, is often called the bright side of the bay. Home to over 400,000 residents, the city is one of the most diverse in the nation. But the city also has a dark side. And in 2007, Oakland's violence leapt off the front pages when a prominent reporter was gunned down in broad daylight. Oakland is the third largest city in the Bay Area and has been voted one of the most exciting places to live in the United States.
Oakland has so many wonderful attributes. It has spectacular neighborhoods. It has spectacular people in it.
Oakland is a mecca in everything you can think of. We're a mecca in the sports industry. We're a mecca in music production. We're a mecca in arts.
But Oakland also has a very different kind of reputation.
Oakland has a dark side, ranking amongst the most dangerous cities in California.
In the 1980s, Oakland became well known for the crack epidemic. Our all-out gang warfare, murders on the street, drove us to the #1 violent city in the state of California.
In spite of that, the residents of Oakland remain fiercely proud of their history, especially those in the Black community.
We have a sense of pride here in this city that's not matched by anyone.
Oakland has always had such a strong history, from the Panthers to the Black businesses here to gospel.
African American history here in Oakland is deep, rich, varied, and it goes way back to the Transcontinental Railroad. Its terminus was here in Oakland, not in San Francisco. And a lot of African Americans who worked the railroad settled in what is West Oakland today.
But even in a tight-knit community like Oakland, contentions can form. And on August 2nd, 2007, a brutal crime would send shockwaves through the city. For the residents of Oakland, it begins like any other workday, with a busy morning commute.
It was a sunny, warm morning. There were lots of people out, lots of vehicular traffic, people going to and from work. And then there was just the actual foot traffic.
But around 7:30 a.m., this relatively peaceful routine suddenly erupts into violence.
You know, a man just got his cup of coffee. He's walking to work. Somebody pulls up in a white van, gets out the ski mask with a shotgun.
He saw a guy in black run across the street with a shotgun, and the guy shot him. And when he fell, he rolled over, and then they shot him in the face.
I couldn't believe that it happened in the manner that it did. It was something out of a movie.
Witnesses immediately call 911, and police and paramedics arrive minutes later. But it's far too late to save the victim.
He was pronounced dead on the scene.
It's a scene that has become all too common. But this time, the victim is someone everyone knows. A beloved journalist named Chauncey Bailey.
When I arrived at the scene, Chauncey Bailey had already been pronounced deceased, so therefore his body was not transported to a hospital. He was just covered with a tarp, awaiting the arrival of the Alameda County Coroner's Office to recover his body. The area that Chauncey Bailey was shot is 14th Street in downtown Oakland. Major thoroughfare, many individuals who are coming and going to work. Because it was broad daylight, early morning hours, there were multiple witnesses, onlookers, and people in disbelief as word spread that Chauncey Bailey had been killed.
You couldn't think of why did it happen. And I didn't get it, and we were just in shock.
Mr. Bailey's office, the Oakland Post, was just a block and a half away. In the opposite direction was the McDonald's, and then just beyond the McDonald's was the county courthouse. So this took place in view of the county courthouse.
For Chauncey Bailey, this iconic investigative journalist, to be murdered, it really puts you in a high-pressure situation because you want to solve it, because he was so beloved to the people of Oakland.
Chauncey Bailey was born and raised in Oakland. Chauncey's love of language eventually led him to pursue journalism. After graduating from San Jose University, he worked in Connecticut, Chicago, and Detroit before eventually returning home to work as a cub reporter for the Oakland Post.
The Oakland Post is one of our leading papers out here, especially for the Black community. He was the classic reporter, the one that would get the whole story before he let you know about it.
He came from the old school of hard knocks, shoe leather reporting newspapers, and would ask the tough questions.
Chauncey immediately stood out among his peers, not only for his writing, but for his personality as well.
Chauncey was dapper. He always wore suits. He was charming. He was funny. He had a great sense of humor. He was witty.
He was a very personable, very likable, and a very intriguing person.
He was a wonderful storyteller, which is what made Chauncey the reporter that he was.
Chauncey was very passionate. He was someone who cared a lot about the Black community, had strong opinions about Black empowerment and business.
Over the next few years, Chauncey honed his craft, working as a print and TV news reporter. His platform grew even larger in the 1990s when he became a familiar face on the Soul Beat TV network.
Soul Beat was a 24-hour Black-owned television network. It traditionally played music videos, and then it also did interviews.
Soul Beat was awesome. Soul Beat was a thing on cable television. And it was a guy who lived here in the city. They did a lot of incredibly awesome music off of Higginberger Road, which is kind of a pretty famous road here in Oakland.
Chauncey was the news director for Soul Beat.
Oh, Chauncey Bailey from Soul Beat.
Chauncey developed a 1-hour news show, and it was pertinent to the Black community because he would deliver a lot of news that wasn't on your local news.
He would do stories about Black women and their efforts to start businesses. He would do stories about young men who were overcoming obstacles. He would also do good stories when Black History Month or other things came up. He would do cultural stories.
He was basically telling stories on the newscast that was ignored by other news outlets.
When Chauncey finally slowed down long enough to start a family, he passed his love of journalism on to his son.
One of the things I really remember about Chauncey was his son, Quincy, who he used to bring into the newsroom and who he was very proud of. And he was a kid who sort of grew up before our eyes in the newsroom.
Chauncey's like, I don't care if my son doesn't do anything else, but he's gotta read. I think his son was reading by the time he was 3.
Although the marriage didn't last, Chauncey and his son remained close. And in 2005, Chauncey's career came full circle when he returned to the Oakland Post, this time as editor-in-chief.
Chauncey was like the perfect person to take that job. He really added a lot of experience and depth to that publication at a really important time.
It was a real dope paper. He would do stories that was really important to the community.
Now, just 2 months later, Chauncey has been gunned down in broad daylight, and Oakland police want to know why.
This had been the first time in a very long time that a U.S. journalist was actually killed on U.S. soil. So the level of importance in solving this case, the level of bringing closure and offering answers was paramount.
For those who live and work in Oakland, California, gun violence is a harsh reality.
Oakland, like many urban centers, has its struggles and its challenges. He obviously was known for having lots of crime. It was affected deeply by the drug trade in the 90s.
The high level of violence during the crack epidemic has given Oakland a reputation that has been very hard for us to shake.
In this case with Mr. Bailey, he was an investigative journalist. But because he was so admired and so loved by the community, that it definitely did put a lot of pressure on the police to find the culprits.
Fortunately, it isn't difficult to find witnesses who are able to describe what happened.
There were many people that saw Mr. Bailey get off of the AC Transit public bus and go into the McDonald's.
Chauncey would go there, get his coffee, and then walk to work. That was his routine. You know, you could set your watch by him.
Eyewitnesses say that's when a man wearing a ski mask walked straight towards Chauncey and then shot him. Chauncey's wallet and personal belongings weren't taken, so it doesn't appear to be a robbery.
There wasn't the taking of jewelry. There wasn't the taking of his wallet or credit cards or even an expensive cell phone. None of that was taken. So that's an indicator to the police that this was not about robbery. This had another motive to it.
The gunman used a shotgun to kill Mr. Bailey, shooting the gun upwards to 3 times, depending on the individuals that you talk to. I know for a fact that he was hit twice. The last one, execution style, as he lay on the ground, already suffering from 1 gunshot wound.
My first thought was that it was probably something personal and not professional, because journalists don't tend to just get shot in the street in the United States.
But according to his colleagues, Chauncey seemed to have more friends than enemies.
Chauncey was a bit of a man about town. He got around, and he was a social animal as well. So he would go to many events, pressers in the afternoon, social things at night, and he had many casual acquaintances.
Chauncey Bailey had an infectious personality. He was very talkative with everyone, men and women.
He also appeared to be on good terms with his ex-wife, despite frustration over their custody arrangement.
His son lived down in Southern California. He would always talk about how he wished his son could come up here and live with him in Oakland.
Anytime you may have a situation where somebody has that kind of a background, from an investigative standpoint, you have to look at every angle of an investigation. Could it be a personal relationship that motivated revenge in some kind?
Former colleague Zima Wyatt recalls an incident that happened shortly before his death.
We were riding to a press conference at City Hall, and I noticed that he was acting real quiet. And he said, "Zima, I feel like someone is following me." Jokingly, really not believing that someone was really following him. First thing I said was, "What woman is trying to kill you now?" He's like, "No, Zima, someone is following me, and I think they're trying to kill me." And the way that he said, "No, Zima," let me know something was wrong, but I just still couldn't fathom that someone was trying to kill him.
Chauncey's family suspects it wasn't a former girlfriend, but someone with a grudge against Chauncey for his hard-hitting journalism.
When you're seeking to get at the truth and you're trying to hold power to account, you have to ask questions that people don't necessarily want to answer. He probably had a list of detractors and people who thought of him unfavorably.
But which one of them hated Chauncey enough to commit murder?
It became very evident that there were other things going on in his life that could have led to violence.
The assassination of Chauncey Bailey wasn't the first time that something of that nature had happened or been associated with the city of Oakland. Back in the early 1970s, one of the first black superintendents, Marcus Foster, was assassinated by the SLA.
And the Black Panther Party was founded in Oakland.
As controversial as the Black Panthers were, their leaders were committed to the people of Oakland. This led to a mistrust between the police and the community.
Oakland, California is a city rich in tradition.
I've traveled this country, and I can tell you that this city is the wealthiest community I've ever seen. And when I say wealthy, I'm not just referring to the riches in terms of your bank account. I'm talking about the riches in terms of culture, in terms of pride.
But in August of 2007, Oakland lost a piece of that legacy when 57-year-old journalist Chauncey Bailey was gunned down.
Chauncey Bailey being killed was a grim reminder to everyone in the community because he was so well known and so well loved.
The entire city was affected by his death. Most of all, his fellow journalists.
We started doing the stories, of course, from the day that he was shot and killed. What does that really mean about what's happening in our country when the foundation of a democracy is the First Amendment?
But despite all of the media attention, detectives still had very little to go on.
Every lead, every rumor that came back was all proved to be not accurate.
There wasn't no jealous husband or nothing like that. You couldn't think of why did it happen.
Investigators hope a thorough examination of the crime scene evidence will create a lead.
There were 2 shotgun shell casings that we located at the scene, and they were in fairly close range to the body. When a shotgun is fired and then it's chambered, the shell casing pops out, falls to the ground. That casing was collected.
It was clear due to the actual gunshot wounds and the damage done and the casings on the scene that a 12-gauge shotgun was used to shoot and execute Mr. Bailey.
One of the first things that an investigator will do is to run those shells through ballistics to see whether or not there have been any other crimes that have been committed pertaining to those shells or that particular type of weapon.
The shotgun shells turn out to be a perfect match for several others found at 2 different murder scenes the previous month.
I was in the middle of a major investigation involving the 2 murders of Odell Roberson and Michael Wills. I had SWAT teams on standby, ready to take this case down the very next morning.
The weapon used had been traced to employees working at a popular local establishment, Your Black Muslim Bakery.
Your Black Muslim Bakery has been operating for decades. They started in multiple locations throughout Oakland, but found a home in North Oakland, which was on the border of Berkeley and Oakland.
It isn't a place anyone would normally associate with crime. The store was founded in 1968 by owner Yusuf Bey, who was inspired by the teachings of the Nation of Islam to provide opportunities for young black men.
I remember when I would see the Black Muslims walking down the street with their bow ties and pies and clean and dapper and respectable. It was a source of pride for me as a young African-American man.
They used it as a business opportunity to sell food and beverage, as well as to educate the community, feed the less fortunate individuals, and be a sanctuary for people in the neighborhood who need assistance, but at the same time being able to help themselves.
The Your Black Muslim Bakery, they preached a lot of self-reliance and young black men, if you need a place to go, if you're disenfranchised, you can come here, we'll put you to work.
Over the years, the business had expanded, taking on a different kind of role in the community.
They had a very large footprint with their bakery, multiple residence apartments, as well as facilities where they provided childcare, lunch locations, and other community outreach.
They had a vast security force, and they hired them out to events.
One thing about Muslim security is like if you seen them somewhere, nobody would act up. Their security was tight, period. Folks had respect for it.
Their security forces were around town with their red bow ties. A lot of folks who lived in the neighborhood were glad to have them there because crime really dropped drastically when they had their security people walking the streets.
But the positive impact of Yusuf's vision changed dramatically once he passed away.
Your Black Muslim Bakery was an organization that was involved in multiple illegal activities operating under the protection of a faith-based group. Your Black Muslim Bakery had been the focus of many criminal investigations, ranging from statutory rape, torture, kidnap, all the way up into murder.
Everything from fraud to shootings to homicide to vandalism. There was a number of crimes across the spectrum that were taking place there.
In 2005, 6 members of the Black Muslim Bakery were arrested in a faith-related crime spree.
There were some liquor stores in West Oakland that the bakery objected to because they said their part of the religion prohibits the consumption of alcohol. So one evening, a bunch of these guys from the bakery go down there with baseball bats and just destroy all the bottles. And there's this poor immigrant guy trying to run a shop there so he can feed his family.
But why would the bakery want to get rid of Chauncey Bailey? The city of Oakland has long been known for its political activism.
Oakland was always the engine that drove causes in the Bay Area. We'll be the first to legalize something, or we'll be the first to push a button.
Yusuf Bey built his store, Your Black Muslim Bakery, on the dream of shaping a better world for Oakland's black community. But his son had different ideas.
Yusuf Bey Sr., he died in the early 2000s. And upon his passing, he left the bakery to 3 or 4 older gentlemen that had been working throughout the years. Antar Bey, who was 20 or 21 years old, he was young, but he wanted to have possession of the bakery. There was a clash between the young and the old. There was a bookkeeper at the bakery by the name of Wajid. He disappeared. Sometime later, his body was discovered buried in a shallow grave in East Oakland. Upon his disappearance, the other older gentlemen decided they wanted nothing more to do with this, which left Antar to run the bakery.
After Antar was killed in a carjacking, his brother Yusuf Bey IV took over and followed in his footsteps. Now police have reason to believe employees of the bakery were involved in the murder of Chauncey Bailey. And on August 3rd, less than 24 hours after Chauncey was shot, they conduct a raid on the bakery's buildings. The raids produced 7 arrests and a cache of evidence.
We found evidence that linked members of the Your Black Muslim Bakery to not only the 2 murders that we were investigating, but other crimes that were under investigation as well.
And in a bizarre twist, the most damning piece of evidence literally lands at investigators' feet.
That's actually pretty normal behavior for a suspect to try to get rid of evidence. Whether it's a drug dealer and he's trying to flush drugs, or it's somebody trying to shred documents. One of the suspects, the idiot, thought that he was going to throw away evidence and threw the gun out the window, and it landed right in front of the police.
The bakery's leader, Yusuf Bey IV, and the man who tossed the gun, 19-year-old Devondre Broussard, are among those taken into custody. Broussard is a handyman at the bakery with a long rap sheet.
Mr. Broussard was a polycriminal. He had multiple arrests for an assortment of crimes. Originally, Mr. Broussard indicated that he was not responsible for the murder of Mr. Bailey, that he had nothing to do with it. He was adamant that he was not responsible, that he didn't, in fact, participate in the murder of Mr. Bailey.
Yusuf Bey IV also claims he's innocent, but says he knows who was responsible.
Yusuf Bey IV, he indicated that others may have done things thinking that they were doing for him at his behest. And he went so far as to basically point me in the direction of who it was, which was Mr. Broussard.
What we have is a crime boss pointing the finger at one of his underlings. And as an investigator, you don't want to let anybody off the hook, big fish or little fish.
Mr. Broussard indicated he wanted to speak to Yusuf Bey IV alone for just a few minutes, and then after that, he would tell us the truth.
Detectives put Yusuf and Broussard in the same room together, The unconventional move quickly pays off.
We stepped out of the room. I think I checked my watch. I think I gave them 4 minutes.
So the police leave Devondre and Yusef in a room together. And the police come back, and all of a sudden, Devondre is singing a different tune.
Mr. Broussard proceeded to tell me that he was, in fact, the shooter of Mr. Bailey. He said he did it because Mr. Bailey was going to write something about the bakery.
Investigative journalism has a lot in common with what police do. Sometimes their work can actually lead to the solving of a case.
The Center for Investigative Reporting, the nation's first nonprofit journalism organization, got its beginnings in Oakland.
They focus on aspects of the investigation that the police just didn't have the resources to follow up on.
The city of Oakland is still reeling from the murder of well-respected journalist Chauncey Bailey. And on August 8th, 2007, they show up to pay their last respects.
The service was huge. It looked like everybody in Oakland was there. That was a testament of what Chauncey meant to people.
Chauncey was committed to the city of Oakland, and in particular the Black community. He reported on the good things that helped Oakland, and the bad things that were destroying Oakland.
His death didn't just devastate people. It took something away from us.
Among the mourners who fill St. Benedict's Church in East Oakland is publisher Paul Cobb, who vows to continue Chauncey's work investigating your Black Muslim bakery.
This community will know what Chauncey Bailey and I were working on.
An employee of the bakery, 19-year-old Devondre Broussard, has been held without bond after confessing to the crime. Broussard claims he acted alone, killing Chauncey to stop him from finishing a scathing article about the bakery and its patriarch, Yusef Bey.
Yusef Bey, the senior, had been charged with inappropriate conduct with young women for rape. The noose was tightening around that empire, and Chauncey had reported on this. Yusef Bey, he had gotten cancer and ultimately died before going through the trial. But his son, Yusef Bey IV, always hated Chauncey for reporting on those stories.
Although they can't prove it yet, Chauncey's colleagues believe Yusef Bey IV ordered Broussard to carry out the hit.
You had newspaper people, you had TV people, you had radio people, all coming together.
We formed the Chauncey Bailey Project. It was reminiscent to me of the assassination of Bowles in Arizona those many years ago, which was a very big deal.
They took it upon themselves to actually continue the investigation and make sure that Chauncey Bailey's murder was not in vain and that all people responsible were held accountable.
That task becomes more difficult when Broussard's lawyers instruct him to withdraw his statement, claiming his confession was coerced by Sergeant Longmire of the Oakland Police.
First, Broussard is denying this murder. Then they let Bey come in, have a conversation with him. And then after the conversation, Broussard admits to the murder. But they don't record it.
The media felt that there was something not right about all of it. They felt that something was afoot. So they started looking and creating.
Now, I don't personally think that Longmire was dirty, but I think that he left himself open to criticism. There was a feeling that he was sort of too close to Bey.
It comes out that Sergeant Longmire had known Yusef Bey IV for 2 years and cultivated a personal relationship with him. Some believe it is a conflict of interest that allowed Bey to evade arrest.
There was one good, strong voice in the Oakland Police Department that kept saying to the command staff, that bakery is a criminal enterprise and we need to do something about it. But his ability to establish a rapport with people that were really difficult to communicate with was used against him.
OPD Homicide were the darlings of the media. A short time later, when they found out that Yusuf Bey IV was not being charged, we became the black sheep.
The Oakland Police Department faces even sharper criticism when the Chauncey Bailey Project uncovers a shocking revelation about the raid on the bakery.
It was initially planned for a day or two before Mr. Bailey's murder.
The morning of August 2nd, when Chauncey Bailey was murdered, our homicide section was in the middle of investigating multiple murders involving the Your Black Muslim Bakery.
The police and SWAT teams delayed it because there were a couple people who were on a camping trip.
The two guys who were supposed to be leading this task force to shut down the bakery had gone up to the Sierras to go camping and fishing, and they were a little bit late coming back, so they called the then chief of police and said, hey, we're not going to be able to make it for this raid. Can you postpone it for a day or two? And guess what happened the next day, because the raid didn't take place? They shot and killed Chauncey Bailey. Now, the police department command staff was in a very embarrassing situation. They could have prevented this if they had just done their police duty.
To combat the negative press, Police Chief Wayne Tucker takes the highly unusual step of imposing a gag order. The ensuing controversy causes Chauncey's murder investigation to grind to a halt.
There were 3 internal investigations, 1 DOJ investigation, and 1 federal institution that had made some inquiries on this. So it received so much incredible scrutiny.
I truly believe there was paralysis by analysis when it came to this investigation.
Then in June of 2008, the Chauncey Bailey Project releases a video they've obtained, which seems to finally prove Yusuf Bey IV was involved.
So there's a key moment in the investigation when we got a hold of this footage of them being interviewed.
We were able to see the videotape of Yusuf Bey and 2 of his compatriots, not realizing that everything was being recorded.
So I gave him a gun, the one that they used.
Yusuf Bey was bragging about the crime, essentially. And he wasn't saying, I'm the one who was instrumental behind it, I ordered it. And that's what I was waiting for, is to hear something like that.
That's no different than any street hood bragging about a murder that he heard about or that he saw. So you don't have enough material there to charge or to move forward with Mr. Bey.
April 2009. For more than a year, the investigation into Chauncey Bailey's murder has stalled due to controversy surrounding the Oakland Police Department. But now the primary suspect, Devondre Broussard, suddenly changes his mind again. He's ready to make a deal with prosecutors.
So much of this has to do with Devondre flipping, going from denial to taking a fall for his leader, to realizing that he was the sucker. He wasn't a soldier, as Bey used to call him, but rather that he was a dupe. And that he should not go down for Yusuf Bey when it was Yusuf Bey who was the mastermind of this.
Facing life in prison, Broussard agrees to plead guilty and testify against his employer, Yusuf Bey IV. In April, he goes before the grand jury and tells them about the order to kill Chauncey Bailey.
He had a history of writing negative articles about members, all the way up to the father and founder of the Your Black Muslim Bakery.
But what caught the eye of the Black Muslim Bakery folks was a story that he was doing on the finances of the bakery.
One of the big concerns for Yusuf Bey IV was that the probate court was going to hear and learn about some things that would cause the probate judge to strip the bakery away from Yusuf Bey IV.
Yusuf Bey IV was under the impression that either the story had not been written and he was going to prevent its being reported were that it was only in Chauncey Bailey's head and that by killing the man that he would kill the story.
Broussard says Bay planned the shooting, selecting him and getaway driver Antoine Mackey for the job.
Bay manipulated him and the shooter by showing them videotape of Chauncey Bailey at his father's funeral. And then he gave Broussard the shotgun, and these guys are loyal soldiers, so you know they're going to do anything for him.
On August 2nd, Broussard and Mackey stalked Chauncey Bailey on his way to work, waiting for the right moment to strike.
They saw Chauncey Bailey come from his house, and the plan was to execute him right there. Unfortunately, they were not able to shoot him because he got onto an AC Transit bus. They then followed the bus to downtown Oakland and saw him get off and go into the McDonald's. After he came out the McDonald's, they saw their opportunity to actually execute him.
Chauncey's walking along, a white van with no plates. He's roaring up. Devondre Broussard jumps out with a shotgun and drops him. Shoots him twice. He falls. Devondre sprints back to the van being driven by Mackey. For some reason or another, either he's been told to go back there and finish him off, or he decides to do it. Jogs back over to Chauncey's fallen body and unloads another couple of shells into his head. Then they speed away.
On April 29th, 2009, the grand jury indicts Yusuf Bey IV for ordering the murders of 3 men, Chauncey Bailey, Odell Robertson, and Michael Wills. Antoine Mackey is also charged, and on March 21st, 2011, both he and Bey stand trial in Alameda County.
The trial was pretty sensational. I had dozens of news crews and newspaper folk and everybody else and their brother-in-law.
Along with Broussard's damning testimony, prosecutors showed the jury a tape of Yusuf Bey IV joking about Chauncey's death.
It was really important evidence because he knew explicitly what happened. It had been reported to him hours or an hour after Devondre had executed him on his orders.
The defense attempts to discredit Broussard's testimony, calling him a liar who'd already changed his story several times.
If they can find something that will discredit somebody as far as their character or their credibility or their integrity in some way, they'll use anything and everything that they can against the other person.
Fortunately for justice, the Alameda County District Attorney had a great prosecutor in Melissa Crum who brought the case home.
The Yusuf Bey IV was convicted of all 3 murders.
Antoine Mackey is also convicted. Both he and Bey received consecutive life sentences with no chance for parole. For his role, Broussard receives 25 years. The city of Oakland was forever changed by the murder of Chauncey Bailey. Not only because he is missed, but because his case ultimately brought about the kind of reform he fought for during his career.
If you fast forward to present day, Oakland has been deemed one of the safest cities around. We have been nationally recognized as far as dropping our violence rate.
I think Chauncey was one of those unsung heroes that people didn't get what he was attempting to do until after he was murdered.
Journalism can be a risky business, but we do it because we love it and because we believe in the role that journalism plays in our society and in our democracy. Chauncey didn't deserve to be shot down in the street for trying to do his job.
Chauncey Bailey's death should not be in vain, but rather a time when we can remember that a free press is in fact the very foundation of a democracy.
Baltimore is a vibrant and diverse city known for its revitalized Harborfront district. Just 40 miles from the nation's capital, the city of neighborhoods is filled with historic monuments and home to Johns Hopkins University. But it's also a town plagued by a history of violent crime. And in 2017, a high-profile shooting would put a strained relationship between residents and law enforcement to the test. The city of Baltimore has a rich history that goes back over 2 centuries.
Baltimore in the 19th century was one of the richest cities in the country because we had a thriving port.
But by 1975, the port, along with the rest of Baltimore, had fallen into disrepair. So a group of investors met to brainstorm ways to reinvigorate the economy. From that meeting, a new nickname was coined, Charm City.
Baltimore underwent a revitalization of the inner harbor, and that was done in hopes of attracting more tourists.
You have a mix of young people out of college who are employed by a number of different companies here that have kind of taken the place of the old blue collar.
You go down to that waterfront and it's like no other in the country. It's beautiful. That's not Baltimore that a lot of people, including my brother and me, grew up in.
For all its charm, Baltimore has long been synonymous with crime. And the city got a deadly reminder of that fact on July 2nd, 2017. Around 8 p.m., Baltimore police received a 911 call about a fatal shooting on the west side.
Hello? This is Baltimore City 911. Yeah, could you please send the police to park out evidence? My son said somebody murdered in the room.
Officers are immediately dispatched to the address.
Argyle is in the Central District. It's off of Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare. It's a row home. There wasn't really anybody out at this particular corner because there's a bunch of vacant homes and a vacant lot. When I went into the house, we walked around and I immediately saw the victim on the ground. He was obviously deceased from a gunshot wound to the head.
Unfortunately, this kind of violence has become an all too common sight for police. But this time, the victim is someone they know.
July 2nd, I went and met with a buddy of mine down in Anne Arundel County and got a half a bushel of crabs. I'm coming back home and I'm pulling up in the driveway and I get a text on my cell phone. It's the thread that I had seen way too many times. And it's a formula, basically. It's a format, I should say, of the date, time, location, what. And reading it, and I see Deanna Smith. And it said, lay it in a pool of blood. I called the district commander who was on scene of the homicide. And I said, my brother's name is Deanna Smith.
The Baltimore where Deon Smith was raised isn't somewhere tourists often go.
Deon Smith was 9 years old when he was sent to live with his father in West Baltimore. And when he arrived, it was very much like it is somewhat today. It was plagued with drugs and violence.
Baltimore has definitely become synonymous with crime. It's ranked number 3 in the country for having one of the highest crime rates.
We grew up in poverty, so we was forced to grow ahead of our time, and you see things that you're not supposed to see.
But Dion had something a lot of boys his age did not have: positive role models.
Dion's situation was actually somewhat better than some of the people I've covered in West Baltimore, in that TJ Smith, his brother, really put the effort in to try to help him as many ways as possible.
I'll tell him, I don't care if you're not doing anything. There's people out here that are. And you can easily be lumped in and be part of this.
However, that didn't stop Dion from falling prey to the same problems as the rest of his peers.
I think his first job was as a lookout for some drug dealers in West Baltimore. And he'd say, "Time out," when the police was coming down the block. They paid him, I think, $30 a day to do that.
He wasn't a tough guy. That wasn't him. He wasn't gonna hurt anybody. He was just a kid who certainly was easily influenced by the environment.
But all of that changed in his 20s when Dion started a family of his own.
I remember going for my sonogram visit, and then they pointed out twins, and that just changed everything. He was like, "I'm gonna be a dad, I'm gonna be a dad." Just so excited.
He was happy, but confused. I guess he felt like he was going into adulthood.
He would call me and say, he just wanted to do right for his kids. That became the transition. That was the light switch. I want to do right for my kids.
Dion stopped hanging out on the corners and joined an outreach program for people trying to straighten out their lives. Afterward, he began working for the organization as a mentor.
He was starting to give back and trying to help kids who had gone through the same thing that he had endured.
I just love that person he became. That working man, about to be father. That was Dion.
Life is life, Dion. Remember that. It ain't always, man.
But before he had a chance to raise his own children, 24-year-old Dion Smith was gunned down. And both the police and his West Baltimore community want to know why.
You should never go into an investigation with any type of predisposed idea. You go into an investigation with a clean slate and you build a case based on the evidence.
We have so many cases that are whodunit, but the first part of the whodunit is what happened, how it happened.
After securing the crime scene, homicide investigators begin searching for any clues the killer may have left behind.
They see a young man who's been shot in the head, but also they see that his pants pockets have been turned inside out. And that would indicate to investigators that perhaps this had been a robbery.
The door was unlocked, which gave me the idea that he let this person into his apartment. And that person was probably looking for something because there was some things overturned.
However, other details convinced police this wasn't a robbery.
It didn't have anything that you would really go rob, as in you wouldn't go there to steal jewelry, you wouldn't go there to steal money or video games. This looked to me to be more personal.
The very nature of the wounds itself, a shotgun blast to the head, that could have been a planned execution.
A lot of times law enforcement, and I think specifically in a city like Baltimore, there is a natural assumption or leap that when crimes are committed, it's drug-related.
Gun violence in terms of drug organizations exists when drug debts are not paid. It exists when drugs or stashes are stolen from one drug dealer to the next. It exists when corners are occupied by the wrong drug organization.
But according to Dion's loved ones, he'd gotten out of that life years ago, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it.
He didn't really, enjoy running with the bad crowd. He's just caught up in the peer pressure.
When he found out that he having them babies, and the babies were coming, and he was like, okay, I need to get another job. He just didn't really have time to be outside trying to be a drug dealer at that time. After that, it was, okay, I got good money coming in now. I'm not risking my life for it, my freedom for it.
There was no signs of like, hey, this is a cut house. There was nothing to indicate that Mr. Smith was in any way selling drugs out of that apartment at all.
So if this wasn't a robbery or a drug-related shooting, then what did happen? Many areas in Baltimore have been ravaged by the war on drugs. And the west side of the city, where Deion Smith grew up, was hit harder than most.
People talk about Baltimore as a tale of two cities, and what they mean by that normally is in terms of the socioeconomic divides.
I know other cities in America are like this, but you can go from dirt poor to seven-figure homes within a few minutes of one another.
But it wasn't always that way.
West Baltimore is historically rich. The North Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue corridor, there's a lot of historic homes around Reservoir Hill and the like where African Americans settled.
What really, for Baltimore, marked a turning point, I think, was in 1906, when the city was one of the first in the country to codify segregation and pass a law that said that African Americans could not live in certain neighborhoods.
The lines of demarcation, they still exist, but they don't exist. They're there, but the way they are demarcated is by income.
And it's West Baltimore. And, you know, you can go outside right now and you can see these guys out here hustling. You can go up on maybe 2 or 3 corners and you see them hustling.
The block I grew up on, oddly enough, I felt safe growing up there when I was younger. Since the 2000s, things have changed. The violence that we're seeing right now in Baltimore, it's a different type of violence. It seems so indiscriminate.
By July 2017, there had already been 173 murders, and TJ's brother Deion had now become the latest.
The majority of the shooting deaths are black men between the ages of 25 and 29. And the majority of those black men have either been incarcerated or have been involved in some form of violence. People almost develop a nonchalant attitude because it's become so commonplace that people don't even respond to it when they hear about a murder.
But that wasn't the case for Deion's family and friends.
I wrote down pretty bad. He's, kissing our sons goodbye. He's going to see them the next day. And then it's like, well, you can't bring them back.
Investigators have been told that Deion hadn't been involved in the drug trade since he became a father. However, Deion's arrest record indicates that he did have other run-ins with the law.
TJ had helped him get a job at cricket and kind of gave him what he hoped to be, what he needed to get to the next level. And it seemed like it was going well, but then it turns out, unfortunately, that he was fraudulently or faking receipts and was then accused of taking $7,000 from the till. And I think that was a big disappointment.
He made some bad decisions. Absolutely, he made some bad decisions.
He was concerned because of his past and knowing that he had a past record and that this was for a felony amount of money. He was concerned that he was going to go and do real prison time.
Could the pressure to provide for his children have gotten Deion involved in something more dangerous? His brother TJ doesn't think so.
I remember him coming to me and we talking about it, and he was petrified, which was music to my ears. Like, okay, let's line up what you need to do. You need to make things right with the situation that took place, first of all. You need to handle a job and maintain a job and show that you have responsibility.
My understanding is that he seemed to be making progress and had made, sort of a commitment not to fall back into any of the problems he had before.
We're going to break this cycle. We have to. Got to break this cycle. And remember, he was getting prepared for a job interview, and we went and got him some clothes, khakis, shirt, shoes, tie, belt, the whole nine. Get him ready. I remember when I told him, I said it's going to work out. And I actually picked him up from court that day.
He didn't know it was the last time he'd see Dion alive. And as the hunt for his killer continues, residents of West Baltimore wonder.
If a police officer's brother or family isn't safe, I just don't know what else to say about a city.
It reaffirmed the narrative that none of us, not a single one of us, is immune to this violence.
In 2015, Baltimore had a huge surge in violent crime after the controversial death of Freddie Gray. Freddie Gray was arrested for possession of a knife, and he fell into a coma and died while in custody.
As a result, 4 officers were charged with police brutality. When the officers were eventually acquitted, it drove a wedge even further between the police and the community. Detectives in West Baltimore are investigating the murder of 24-year-old Dion Smith, the younger brother of the department's well-known spokesman, TJ Smith.
Normally, a spokesperson for Baltimore City Police would not be that big a deal in a community because you only see them every once in a while. But because violence and crime is so front and center with the media, TJ is a pretty big personality. He was on par with the mayor or other critical people because he was always front and center.
When I took on the role to be the spokesperson for the Baltimore, I'm taking on people. I'm taking on the community. So when you're given such a bully pulpit, I want to make sure I deliver a message of how you can engage to make sure you're not the next person whose door we're going to knock on.
Unfortunately, the strained relationship between residents and law enforcement means that few are willing to talk.
Relationships between the police and the residents is crucial and plays a big portion in the success of an investigation. Because in a city like Baltimore, Baltimore is known for having a snitches get stitches mentality, which means that a lot of the residents are not comfortable with coming forth with information.
Decades of aggressive policing, police brutality, zero tolerance policing has created a very fraught community.
I could see it in the faces of the people who I would interact with. There was always a sense of suspicion.
So how do you solve an investigation when you have an entire community that may be aware of what happened, but they're afraid to discuss it out of fear?
But Dion's family seems to already have their suspicions about one of their own. Dion's cousin Imani, who's been living in his apartment.
Dion and Imani was like really close cousins. Basically, whenever you came over, you always saw Imani.
Like Dion, Imani had a troubled past, so Dion had taken him under his wing, like some of the other boys he had mentored.
Imani wasn't working at the time. He had acquired these felonies where it stunted his ability to just do an application and get a job. He would come home and go back, come home and go back. They would clean his record. He'd throw everything out if you complete this period of probation, and he would do it and then get in trouble again. And he allowed Imani to stay with him, being helpful again, giving of himself again. And they were somewhat like salt and pepper.
But instead of being grateful, Imani seemed resentful of Dion's help.
September 28th, 2009, I remember that day. My uncle passed away, and in his will, he didn't leave anything for my cousin, his son, because he wasn't there when my uncle needed him most and things like that. In the will, my uncle left everything to my dad, but my dad didn't want nothing to do with the house. So, just gave it to my brother. And so my brother had the keys and everything. That right there probably had some jealousy and things going on with that.
Dion and Imani moved into one of the apartments in the building. and Dion took over landlord duties. However, he seemed completely unaware that his cousin harbored any ill will towards him.
He went to my cousin, of course, because why not? We're family. If that was your dad, you're my cousin, let's do this together. They started fixing up things a little bit in there, got it good to go, started renting out some apartments in there. He put a camera up just for security reasons because it's an apartment building. And you want to know who's coming in and out of the building. And I'm thinking, my cousins started seeing okay, we got money coming in and stuff like that. And Dion had rules and stuff too, and Dion was the only one with the keys. That's when things probably went left with them, because you got the youngest person in charge and you a grown man, you're gonna feel some type of way.
And after Dion was shot, the family observed Imani acting rather strangely.
It was just like he just pretended that he didn't know what happened. He went in the house for me and grabbed a few of Dion's belongings and he gave it to me. But he never said, like, I'm sorry, or cried with me, or even hugged me or anything like that.
When Imani came to my house and I asked him what happened, and he treated it as if we're talking about the neighbor up the street or the guy around the corner. I don't know anything. I don't know. I say, Imani, you with Dion all the time.
Dion's sister became convinced Imani had something to do with her brother's death.
That night, when I went to my dad's house, like, I stood over top of him as if, like I was a boxer or something. Like, what's going on? Where were you when Dion was killed? And he wouldn't say nothing. I was ready to swing. TJ pulled me out and I went into the other room, and he was my number one suspect.
The next morning, Dion's father became suspicious as well.
I came from my room. He stepped in the living room area. He says, they going in the house all night. They going in the house all night. And he kind of talks in circles. And what were you talking about? They went in the house.
Imani had been watching investigators at the scene through the apartment building's surveillance camera by using an app on his cell phone.
He taps right into the video camera in the building, and he watched the activity all through the night. It appeared that he didn't even go to sleep because his phone didn't have any charge. I said, well, Imani, you know, you're not going to be able to stay with me. I mean, I'm frankly speaking, I can't trust him.
But was spying on investigators proof that Imani killed Dion?
If you read a person, you could tell their demeanor and things like that. And that whole aura that he had, I was not feeling it. He could not make eye contact with me for nothing.
I think a really good investigator, if you are determined, you turn over every rock, because somebody usually will get some type of point of guilt or consciousness where they want to help with the investigation.
West Baltimore was historically the economic and cultural center of the city's black community. But economic hardship and the drug trade have left row houses empty, and half the families living there in poverty as the neighborhood crumbles around them. As residents deal with violent crime, robbery, and a murder rate 10 times the national average in 2017, many feel that the city doesn't even care.
1/3 of the murders that take place in Baltimore happen in about 5 square miles of the city. What's another person dying in this neighborhood where people already died? What's another vacant home in this community that already has 20, 30, 40 of them?
As a result, police have become used to dealing with the lack of eyewitness testimony, even when crimes take place in public places.
It absolutely is a damned if you do and damned if you don't mentality.
But with Dion Smith's murder, that wouldn't be a problem.
as investigators start to broaden their search for evidence, they catch a lucky break because just in the lobby area of this apartment building, there's a surveillance camera.
There's so many cases with nobody around, no cameras, no videos, no DNA, as opposed to now with Dion, we have something to sink our teeth into.
Once detectives gain access to the recordings, they begin poring over hours of footage, looking for the shooter.
There was no way out the back. You could only come into this place from the front. You could only leave from the front. I knew what the victim looked like. I could see when he came in. And we were also getting the other neighbors. So we're beginning to put the faces to all the players of going past the video.
A short while before Dion was murdered, investigators spot a young man acting suspiciously. And it's not Dion's cousin, Imani.
Eventually, watching the same video, we were able to see the suspect come and the suspect go. And he was the one that was not fitting into the neighbor. This one person we kept on seeing over and over.
And you see the suspect in and out of the house. You know, my brother walking right past him. No issues.
To investigators, it looks like the man is waiting for an opportunity.
There is a sense of foreboding when you watch the video itself, especially knowing what happened later on.
In and out all day long and basically waiting on him like predator and prey.
And then the moment arrives.
You can see a shotgun come out of a bag.
The suspect climbs the stairs to Dion's apartment. Then a few moments later, he runs back out.
We never see the actual shooting, but at this point, he's the only person that could be responsible.
That video was critical because that video put a suspect at the scene at the time of the murder.
None of the other residents can or will tell police who the man is. So investigators enlist the aid of local media. Surprisingly, the move pays off.
If you are fortunate enough to have video surveillance and you're able to share it with the public through the media, I've seen many times where you've been able to solve a case because somebody saw the video and they saw something specific.
As TJ reported on this 173rd murder, it really struck to the core of the violence within the Baltimore City. And rather than people doing what they're very much accustomed to doing, such as not reporting crimes, so-called not snitching, TJ's response garnered an outpouring of support from the community, which caused the phone lines to light up.
They received several tips that the man they're looking for is 21-year-old Terrell Gibson.
Terrell Gibson was 3 years younger than Dion, and Dion and Terrell knew each other growing up in West Baltimore.
Terrell was a childhood friend of ours. He came from a broken home, so he was in foster care, and he was picked on and stuff.
Terrell Gibson was like, in a sense, a mirror image of Dion. You see many kids like this in Baltimore that, just don't have anything to begin with. And, he had been involved in the drug trade.
Terrell had many run-ins with the criminal justice system. Drug charges, assault charges. So you're talking about a young man who had a lot of trouble. Certainly more trouble than Dion had gotten into himself.
The year Terrell spent in jail was for stabbing someone on the bus. He'd just been released the previous December.
I think he was released into a world that frankly didn't really want him. And so I think you learn that there was a lot going on with this young man that could have suggested he was capable of this crime.
Terrell and Dion had been close throughout their teenage years, but had a falling out after Dion became a father.
He did cut some of the friends off that he was hanging with. He stopped smoking weed and stuff like that.
At some point, Terrell started to get on Dion's nerve because he would call while we're out without something. I could feel like something probably was going on with them at the time. But they're boys, you know how guys are, they get over it.
However, police have no doubt that Terrell is the man carrying the shotgun in that video.
He's the right size, shape, build as what's on that video. This is a match, a physical match as to what we see.
You can compare with physical characteristics, whether it's height, weight, tattoos, hairstyles, the walk, the gait of the person, because everybody's walk is different.
We did some photographic lineups from different witnesses and then also identified Terrell as being that person.
So, what could have happened to make Terrell want to kill his childhood friend?
The justice system is broken in the beginning as well as the end. When you incarcerate somebody and you put them in prison and you don't have programs to prepare them once they're released to be able to go back and return to the community. If you're not providing systems to help change, shift the consciousness where they can return to the communities as better men and women, it's a broken system.
When criminals released straight back onto the Baltimore streets commit more crimes, who is to blame? Police in West Baltimore have a suspect in the murder of 24-year-old Dion Smith, his former childhood friend, Terrell Gibson. Terrell has a record of violent crime and was released from prison less than a year before the shooting.
Once they had the video evidence of Terrell Gibson at the location of the murder, at the time of the murder, I think that put Terrell front and center in the case.
He was charged with attempt murder before he actually got out of jail and killed my brother. I felt like the system kind of failed us too, because how you let someone that was locked up as a juvenile come straight out of the system as an adult who doesn't have any mindset of like what you're going to do.
I think he was a classic case of someone who had been involved in violence early on and someone who probably was capable of committing a violent act. And I think that also made the case quite strong against him.
Investigators quickly moved to arrest Terrell.
On July 6th of 2017, our WATF, which is a warrant apprehension task force, located the suspect near crime scene and arrested him without incident. He was brought down to our office, which is the homicide office, and he was read his Miranda rights.
But when police questioned Terrell, he denies everything.
You want to talk to me? I don't do that. You don't want to talk? I ain't trying to self-incriminate myself. I wasn't even told I was running it for questioning.
Even though they can place him at the scene of the crime, detectives know the lack of direct evidence could cause difficulties in court.
The video surveillance is, in fact, great evidence to have, but it's no slam dunk because, for one, that's all they had. And they had the video, but they never found a weapon. They never found a weapon, and there was never a witness that could identify the shooter.
So, investigators review all the security footage again, looking for additional details that might improve their case. Terrell can be seen entering and exiting the building several times during the day. And on one of those occasions, he interacts with another young man.
You see the two men walking in. One of their faces is covered. It seems like they are kind of waiting for something. It's not like someone walking into a hallway. There's a little bit of hesitation, which could be viewed as premeditation or preparing for something that they're about to do.
The second man hands Terrell a black bag, the same bag Terrell takes the shotgun out of a short time later. Dion's family members are able to ID the apparent accomplice.
My cousin Imani, he was standing in the hallway with Terrell Gibson. Once he handed Terrell that black bag, Imani ran out the house. Like, he knew exactly what was going to happen.
When detectives confront Imani, he finally agrees to come clean. From his statement, police are able to put together a clearer picture of what led to Dion's murder.
Imani and Terrell, they don't have jobs, so their job was drugs. That's how them two became friends.
It appears that they went in together to do a drug deal. And it appears that there was some misunderstanding about the drugs, or perhaps Terrell decided he was going to just take all the drugs.
Word on the street was Terrell and Imani, they were actually arguing up on North Avenue about something coming up missing and stuff like that. And again, that's when Dion's name got into it.
So I think that Imani and Terrell might have said, we'll just blame it on him and deal with it that way.
The two men went back to the apartment to wait for Dion. But it's unclear whether Imani knew what Terrell intended to do.
The cousin, he just snapped on not being the killer, but if you were there, you're just as guilty. You're just as guilty. He knew something was getting ready to go down because he got out that house so fast. In fact, that you couldn't warn your own cousin, couldn't protect your own cousin. You had something to do with this. It was just very selfish, very selfish.
Instead of charging Imani with accessory to murder, prosecutors offer him a deal in exchange for his testimony.
Okay, and who was that person? That's Terrell. And what did Terrell do in this whole kill my cousin? He killed your cousin? Okay.
They grabbed Imani up, took him into protective custody. He was there for 2 months with them before we went to trial.
I'm excited because all I know is that Imani is in witness protection and he's going to testify during the trial. And that's when we get to hear what happened and, we really get to hear the story.
In 2017, there were 343 murders in Baltimore, the second highest in 15 years. Dion Smith was number 173. But his connection to the Baltimore City Police put the case front and center in the media.
What we've experienced the last 5 years seems to have busted out of the seams of what you're used to violence being.
The fact that his brother was a police officer definitely gave him an edge. I hate to say that it was treated any differently, but it probably did make him a little bit more aggressive in solving the crime.
21-year-old Terrell Gibson has been charged with the crime. And the fact that prosecutors have Dion's cousin Imani as an eyewitness makes them confident they will get a conviction.
I thought that he would be the key to exactly what's going on and really be able to tell the part and why Terrell Gibson did what he did.
But then, less than 2 days before the trial is set to begin, Imani suddenly disappears.
He left protective custody, and we haven't heard or seen from him since.
It was like, well, why did you even go into witness protection in the first place? It just didn't make sense.
I think what most people don't understand is that in a city like Baltimore that has such a high crime level, they're not even comfortable with being involved in a witness protection program because what happens after the trial is over with? You're putting them back into the cesspool opportunity where 9 times out of 10, something's going to happen. They're going to be retaliated against.
In September of 2018, Terrell Gibson shows up in court looking more like a student than a drug dealer.
It was very hard to see Terrell Gibson in that courtroom, especially when he's like 2 feet away from you and my dad's sitting beside me.
Guy that didn't wear glasses. Now he wearing glasses. I guess that's a look of humility. He'll wear the necktie and dress neat, but the glasses was an add-on.
He pleads not guilty. Without Imani, prosecutors are forced to rely solely on the security camera footage to prove otherwise.
Based on the evidence that the investigators were able to produce for the prosecutors. The state's theory was Terrell was the sole perpetrator of this murder. You have time, you have the date, and you have what clearly looks like the murder weapon. And that's based on the testimony of the forensic doctors who said the cause of death and what he was likely shot with. About as good as it gets for circumstantial evidence.
They believe the shooting was a premeditated act, carried out to cover for a bad drug deal. And the fact that Terrell had been willing to kill his friend even after Dion had tried to help him get back on his feet made his crime even more egregious.
The prosecutor said during the trial, during opening remarks, said, he's a monster. This is a monstrous act, and he's a monster.
But the defense argues that the state can't prove Terrell is the one who pulled the trigger.
The video surveillance merely shows Terrell running out of the building and placing the pistol grip shotgun into his waistband. It does not show him actually shooting Dion.
I mean, just because someone's sitting in a hall under a video camera doesn't necessarily mean they went in and shot somebody.
There were no eyewitnesses to this murder.
But what would the jury believe?
Every jury wants to hear a motive. That's key. And there was no clear motive that anybody could articulate as a witness as to why Terrell, who grew up with Dion, would have wanted to kill Dion.
After 5 days of deliberation, the jury renders its verdict.
Guilty, first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life, suspend all but 65 years. And then he was given a subsequent 20-year sentence.
When the verdict came guilty, everyone on my family side was just excited, sad, tears of joy, tears of sadness because we're here crying because you're gone, but we're here crying because we got justice for your life.
But Imani remains missing to this day.
He's nowhere to be found. He would be the key to exactly what's going on and really be able to tell why Terrell Gibson did what he did. But I know wherever he's at, he's looking over his shoulder. Paranoid.
While Dion Smith's killer may have been brought to justice, violent crime in the city of Baltimore remains a problem with no easy solution.
We look at Baltimore and we look at where this violence is really prolific. And it's been that way for many, 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 many years. And it's generation after generation that are seeing the exact same thing. And really it comes from the lack of investment into people, into the environments that they're in.
What we try to do with these kids in here is give them a fighting chance. I'm a hope dealer. I deal in hope because I see what a lot of people don't see in these kids.
At the end of the day, all I want is for more young men, especially in our city, young black men, to be able to grow up with their children and the children to be able to grow up with their father.
TJ fought a tremendous battle to save his brother Dion from the violence that plagues the streets of West Baltimore. But TJ lost that battle. And he lost that battle, but the war, it rages on.
you.